Investors digesting geopolitical headlines as the U.S. Entered the war between Iran and Israel this weekend. Joining us now to help us understand the economic implications is Allianz Chief Economic Advisor Mohamed El-Erian. Mohamed, always good to have you. Are you surprised at the market's reaction thus far, both in the equity markets and perhaps the oil markets as well, to something we've not seen before, namely those attacks by the U.S. on the nuclear installations?
Thanks for having me, David. I'm not super surprised for three reasons. One is there's genuine debate going on as to whether we will get escalation or de-escalation. And people are arguing on both sides with some amount of conviction, but very little foundation. So there is no clear view on what happens next. Second, the market has been conditioned to fade geopolitical shocks. You make money when you fade geopolitical shocks. Thirdly, the cost of getting it wrong can be very high. And you see this in the oil market. Brent, where it is today, is a very unstable price. Either it should be $15 lower because we have a situation of excess supply in the marketplace, or alternatively, you really believe that we're going to get major disruptions to supply out of the Middle East, and it should be $15 higher. And when you have that amount of gapping risk on both sides, it tends to paralyze you in terms of making any major bets. So you put these three things together, I'm not super surprised.
Do you think at all it influences U.S. growth or inflationary outlook?
I tend to distinguish between direct effects and indirect effects. I don't have a view on direct effects because I don't know whether the U.S. strike on Iran is opening a new chapter in this conflict or actually hasting the closing of a chapter. I don't know, so I don't know what the direct effect is. But you've been hearing all the indirect effects, precautions. People are taking precautions. They're taking precautions on the supply side, and we will likely see more hesitancy on the demand side. So I think you'll get the indirect effects. They're much smaller than the direct effect. They're much more dispersed, but we have to wait and see what the direct effects are.
Sounds like you maybe can sympathize a bit with Bowman's remarks this morning about July.
I can, but the timing surprises me, Carl. It's only a few days when we had 10 voting for 2 cuts, 7 voting for no cuts, and then you had 2 voting for 1 cut, and you had a very clear message that we should wait till after the summer. Now, suddenly, we've had 2 Republican-leaning governors who came out with this notion of July, and they've moved the market. As Sarah said earlier, they really have moved the market. Now we're pricing in 2 cuts this year, and the probability of a September cut has gone up to almost 80%, and July came from nowhere to some 20%. So they have moved the market, but it is a little bit peculiar in terms of coming so soon after the FOMC meeting.
Well, I think they wanted to make clear that they're not necessarily on the patient train with Jay Powell.
Or there's some political influence starting to come into the FOMC, and we're starting to see that. I don't know, Sarah, what the answer is. What I do know is that Chair Powell is going to have a lot of difficulty trying to get everybody unified on a message.
Well, I think that the maybe more important question for the market is which camp is right? Should they be cutting sooner rather than later? And what's the price of waiting?
So my view has been, as you know, that they should be cutting sooner rather than later. I am worried about what's happening to the real economy. I also think, and this is where it gets controversial, I also think that we have to acknowledge that the supply side has become much less flexible, much less elastic. And we've got to be careful of not choking the demand side in trying to get an outcome that is inconsistent with the supply side. So I am on the cut sooner rather than later, but I do understand that a Fed that mishandled so badly the 2021 inflation surge could be rather hesitant, especially in this political environment.
Yeah, and politics, of course, may play an increasingly important role. Mohamed, to be continued as always. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.